In 1876, the Democrats really started to gain power politically in the South. Now, they had two different ways of doing this, one towards black people and one towards white people. The way they did it with black people is they committed fraud and they used intimidation. So for fraud, what they would do is at a polling area, they would tell the African Americans, "Oh, you cannot be here. Your polling place is, let's say, maybe 100 miles, 150 miles away." And you have to remember, this is before cars, fast trains, and things like that. There were trains back then, but they weren't that fast. And the other thing was, in the South, the trains did not come and go as often as they do nowadays. Um, Back then, it was maybe came through a small town once, maybe even twice, if they were lucky. But that's about it. Um, and let's just say, for instance, some people went and they went to the area where they were told to go. That place may actually tell them, no, you're supposed to be voting at your district, your area. So you have to go back. And by then, chances are the polling was done. They might close early, things like that. That's the kind of fraud they would do. The other thing they did was intimidation. A lot of times they would have um, people standing outside the polling area, maybe members of the KKK, um, basically stopping them, maybe threatening to beat them up. Um, and the sad thing is, they more likely did, and they got away with it. You know, they could say, "Hey, this black guy looked like he was going to attack me, and so I beat him up." You know, and when the truth is probably five or six guys versus one black guy, and you know, all the white guy had to do was self-defense, and he'd get away with it. Now, for the white people, they basically promised them that they would cut taxes because the Republicans did have a high tax in the South. And the thing is, these Democrats would basically tell people in the South, you know what? These Republicans, I bet you anything they're corrupt. Think about it. They're taxing us. Where's that money going? Is it going to you? Is your life better? No, it's not better. So chances are these guys are sending it up north to their buddies, and their buddies up north are living large, or these guys are pocketing the money. And who's paying for it? You are. Yeah. So that's the kind of stuff they would tell the white people in the South against the Republicans to try to get them to vote Democrat, to vote their people in. Because the thing is, the Democrats in the South saw this election of 1876 as a crusade to save the South from the Republican rule. Now, in that 1876 election, there was Rutherford B. Hayes, a Republican, running for president, and Samuel Tilden, who was running against him as a Democrat. Now, the election was going through, and the Electoral College was basically it was tied up. It was really, really close. It was tied up and then close, tied up and then close. So it was a very watched election. But the thing is, there was 20 electoral college votes that were disputed. It could go really either way. Here's the kicker. 19 of those votes came from southern states. Okay. Now, yes, the Republicans did rule that area, but the thing is, the Democrats, they're the ones who lived there. And the Democrats aren't coming in, full force to vote. Now, here's the thing. Um, there is no like smoking gun. There is no physical proof, right? Now, the thing is, the there's a thing called the Compromise of 1877. Now, the thing is, Hayes wins the election, the election of 1876. Now, the funny thing is, people in the South, they didn't want Republicans at all. But somehow, for some reason, the South basically voted for Hayes, who was a Republican for the North. Now, what happened is this. This is where there was a little controversy. In April 1877, Hayes orders that the federal troops in the South be removed. Now, why is that a big deal? Well, the thing is, without federal troops in the South, the Republicans are going to lose control. Okay, um, the policies they set up are basically going to be washed away. So the ban against the Ku Klux Klan from doing anything, that's going to end up like, kind of being backwashed. Um, and the protection that was given to the Republicans and the African Americans was going to fade away. Now, this act is truly the end of the Reconstruction era. Now, the thing is, the people who really suffered the most were African Americans because they didn't have that protection anymore. There was nobody to enforce the policies that made sure that they were protected, that they could vote, that they were going to be able to live um, without being harmed. And this would continue on for another like 80 years until the time of Martin Luther King and the civil rights and things like that. Now, when the Democrats take over and they're now in the House of Representatives, they're in large numbers in the Senate, they actually start to develop some strong ties with the Republicans again. But the thing is, there are some people in the South, especially like big plantation owners, who are like, you know what, we need to go back to the way it was and we need to make our economy strong with the cotton and things like that. But the thing is, a lot of the Southern leaders knew they could not go back to the way it was before the Civil War, where everybody did like cotton and things like that. There was no type of industry. It was just we're going to grow it and that's it. They knew, if something was to happen, if the price of, like, say, cotton was to fall, then their economy would go down again, you know. And if things went worse, then the Republicans could probably come in again. They would lose. The Republicans could gain power again. Um, so they tried to say, you know what? Let's focus on a new South, and they tried to base it off strong industrial economy. So instead of just constantly growing things, let's make something for a change. Now, the North created more railroads and they had a dozen more different type of new industry. Um, the South said they were going to be different, but the truth is they really didn't change. Um, they did have some industrial growth, but it only accounted for 4% of their total farmlands. So basically, when they would have cotton fields, they would maybe have a building nearby or within a couple miles, several miles. They actually made that cotton into yarn. They used that cotton to make clothing or whatever it may be. So that it went from the field to a factory to be turned into something. Um, but again, it only accounted for 4% of the total farmland, um, which isn't much at all. Now, for the African Americans, life seemed to be going back to the old ways. They saw it as returning to the old South, where they were living in poverty, they were treated horribly, and even though they legally had rights in the South because of state rights, they were treated as second-class citizens. Right? Now, African Americans and even poor white people became tenant farmers. Now, you should know that word from your vocabulary. but just in case you may have forgotten, those are people who are paying rent for the land they're working on. Okay, and with that, they ended up being sharecroppers. Okay, so sometimes they would have to give up maybe sometimes like a quarter of what they grew, and sometimes they have to give up as much as 2/3 of what they grew. Now, imagine this: you're living in a farm area. Let's say I own that farm area. You, being a tenant farmer and a sharecropper, you would live on my land, but you would be growing food or cotton or whatever it may be. You'd be planting the seeds, the fertilizer, using my tools, using my animals, and you would do all the work. I would get a huge percentage, and you would get very little. Now, this is significant because the thing is, the goal of the plantation owner, which would be me in this case, is not to let you get money. Because here's the thing, if you're able to make money, save money, um, as time goes on, you'll be able to buy your own thing of land, and then I would lose out on workers. And if I lose out on workers, that means I don't have somebody who will work that land and make me money. Again, it's kind of like slavery, except now they're not just focusing on African Americans, they're also using poor white people. Okay, because now money talks. So a large majority of these African Americans and white people, they ended up staying poor, and it would not change for some time, for years, decades, that this system kept going. And it was very, very, very hard for these people to prosper. And again, the people who had the money, had the land, who were basically kicking back, um, they did everything they could to make sure that uh, the African Americans and the poor white people did not prosper, and they stayed where they were. Now, here is your final question. What do you think is going to happen to the African Americans in the South now that the Democrats have a lot of political power and the Reconstruction era is over? Justify your educated prediction. Now, for those of you guys who may have some prior knowledge about the time between the Civil War and the time of the Civil Rights era, which would be like with Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Medgar Evers, people like that, if you have an idea, you can easily answer this question. Um, it would not give you a problem. But if you don't know, really think about it. Now, everything I've told you and you've learned within the past 2 weeks, or I should say the last about 5, 6 videos. So, how you would write it out is, I believe that since Reconstruction is over and the Democrats have a lot of political power, that the African Americans in the South will what? Okay, remember, it's one thing to answer it, but to back it up, justify it. Why do you think that? That's where you get your points. Okay, so this is the end of the Reconstruction videos. Hopefully you learned a lot from these videos and from the lecture. Um, when you go into class, make sure these notes have your name on it, um, and be sure to put it into the basket next to the door, and that'll be it. Okay. Um, the next thing we'll be talking about is in the Industrial Revolution, Nikola Tesla, and Thomas Edison, and the monopolies that some people basically created. Okay, so it's gonna be a lot of fun. All right. But other than that, I hope you guys have a good day. All right, take care.